Hello everyone, here we'll try to learn chewing and deglutition. The learning objectives would be list the function of mastication, name the phases of deglutition, and understand the importance of each phase, outline mechanism of deglutition, appreciate why one should not speak while swallowing, list the common disorders of deglutition. Chewing or mastication. The process of mastication is initiated by usually reflex following arrival of food in the mouth. Mastication has following functions. Mastication cuts and grinds larger food particles into smaller particles. It increases the salivary secretion. It mixes the food with the saliva. It lubricates contents of oral cavity so that swallowing becomes easier. It breaks down starch and allows saliva to mix with the broken starch particles. Therefore, chewing improves the taste of the starch containing foods. It improves dental strength and hygiene. It keeps to keep the teeth strong and in good health. Dentists always encourage chewing of food adequately before swallowing. Mechanism of mastication. Chewing occurs due to the forceful contraction of four group of muscles of mastication. Masseter, which elevates the mandible and helps in cleansing of teeth. Temporalis helps in retracting mandible. Pterygoids, external and internal, protrude mandible and depress chin. This helps in opening of the mouth. Alternative contraction of the right and left pterygoids help in grinding movements. Buccinator prevent accumulation of the food between cheek and mouth. Swallowing or deglutition. Swallowing or deglutition is a process by which food material from oral cavity is transported into esophagus. Though it is initiated voluntarily, most of it is involuntary or reflexive. Therefore, it is also called as deglutition reflex. During the reflex act of deglutition, respiration is inhibited, which prevents the entry of food into trachea. The receptor for deglutition reflex are present near the opening of the pharynx. The afferent impulses are transmitted to deglutition centers, which are present in medulla and pons. The efferent are directed to the muscles of pharynx and upper esophagus via cranial nerves. The stages are uh, the oral phase, pharyngeal phase, and the esophageal phase. Oral phase is also called as buccal phase. It is voluntary phase of swallowing. It is initiated when tongue separates a bolus of food from the mass of food stuff present in the mouth. At the beginning, the tip of the tongue presses against the hard palate and then the body of tongue presses on it. This action of the tongue moves the food backward in the oral cavity. Thus, the food bolus is forced into the pharynx. Once the food touches the receptor of the pharyngeal opening, swallowing reflex gets initiated. The pharyngeal phase. The major objective of pharyngeal phase is to push the food bolus into the esophagus without entry into the respiratory passage. The reflex pathway receptors are present around the pharyngeal opening. Afferents are carried by the pharyngeal receptors are transmitted through the trigeminal, glossopharyngeal, and vagus nerve. The centers for deglutition are nucleus tractus solitarius and nucleus ambiguus, located in the medulla, where nucleus tractus solitarius acts as a sensory and nucleus ambiguus acts as a motor. The efferents organs are the muscles of pharynx and the tongue that are innervated by trigeminal, glossopharyngeal, vagus, and hypoglossal nerves. The different events are the soft palate is pulled in upward direction, the palatopharyngeal folds move in inward direction. These movements prevent entry of food into nasopharynx. This also provides a small passage for food to enter into pharynx. Laryngeal opening is closed by vocal cords and pulled together. The larynx moves in upward against the epiglottis, and these events prevent entry of food into trachea. The superior constrictor muscles of pharynx constrict, which forces food to enter deep into the pharynx and then from there into the esophagus. Simultaneously, a relaxation of the upper esophageal sphincter occurs and allows the food to easily enter into the esophagus. In this phase, respiration is inhibited due to the inhibition of the respiratory centers. Once food enters into the esophagus, which is facilitated by relaxation of upper esophageal sphincter, the peristaltic wave, primary peristalsis, initiated just below the upper esophageal sphincter. Reflexly, upper esophageal sphincter contracts and prevent regurgitation of the food back into the pharynx. The peristaltic wave is at about 3 to 5 centimeters per second. It takes about 10 seconds for food bolus to pass through the entire esophagus. If the primary peristalsis is ineffective, the secondary peristaltic wave is initiated to push the food bolus. So this diagram showing the different phases of deglutition. Note the different phases, that is oral, pharyngeal and esophageal stages. Okay, so in the oral phase, the tongue pushes the bolus, the food into the back of the pharynx. In the pharyngeal phase, the epiglottis covers the glottis to prevent aspiration of the food, that it prevents the food to enter into the trachea, and soft palate is elevated. In the esophageal stage, the upper esophageal uh, it, it relaxes to allow the food to descend into uh, the esophagus. Disorders of deglutition: decrease or absence of deglutition reflex. If the deglutition reflex is impaired or abolished, regurgitation of the food into the nose or aspiration into larynx or trachea occurs. It is seen in ninth and 10th nerve paralysis in the lesions of medulla. Aerophagia is unavoidable swallowing of air along with the swallowing of the food, bolus, and liquids. It is seen in nervous individuals who are decreased tone of upper esophageal sphincter. The air swallowed is usually transferred to the lower part of the GI tract, but partially air is regurgitated into the oral cavity, that is belching, and most of it passes down to the colon and then it expels as a flatus through the anus. Dysphagia is difficulty in swallowing due to any cause. Usually it occurs in acute and severe pharyngitis, but it can also due to the motor problems of pharynx, upper esophagus and foreign body. Acute inflammation in oral cavity. So this is in brief about mastication and deglutition. Thank you.